Hey everyone, what's going on? So we had the version 3.2 part 1 live stream earlier today, and with it we got confirmation on what kind of buffs Wind was going to be getting. She really didn't get anything crazy. It's not like she needed the buffs anyway, but you can still never be too safe, right? This Shouju poll video may be slightly underwhelming because I imagine most of you already know what I'm going to suggest you do, but I do think there are some interesting discussions we can have around Wind, her weapon, or if any of her awarenesses are as good as they were previously made out to be. So first off, let's just hit some general information on Tempest Riko, or Tempest Wind as I'll probably refer to her as. She is a Wind element strategist unit who's going to be an elite crit buffer. She's the only unit that really buffs the way that she does. She can output monster crit mult and attack buffs with some crit rate thrown in there as well. We won't dig too much into the weeds of her kit, as that's kind of more the focus of my character guides. That video is where we'll really take a look at each skill in depth so we can get a better feel for her kit and how she plays. This video is more for general overview of the unit and in what situations I think you could potentially look to pull the character, the weapon, and maybe any awarenesses. With that said, I think it's best to summarize Wind as a unit by saying she is an SP consumption and crit mult scaling buffer who consumes large portions, actually all of her SP as far as the skill 3 goes, to buff allies, and many of her buffs scale on how much SP she consumes, as well as how much crit mult she's built into. She has fairly demanding stat caps that you're going to want to build into if you're maximizing what she's doing. Those two main stats will be SP recovery and crit mult. If her buffs scale on crit mult, building into that one seems obvious, but as a unit who'll be consuming so much SP so frequently, she also wants to be built up on SP recovery so that she can spend the number of SP required to max out her buffs in rotation without having to worry about not having enough. I don't believe the breakpoint numbers changed from the other versions, but I'll cover the new ones in the character guide to come if they did. As of now, we believe the breakpoints will be 450.1% SP recovery and 388% crit mult, courtesy of Lufelnet. Though that crit mult number does potentially go up with Mindscape leveling of her skills, and also if you hit certain awareness breakpoints for those skills as well, but for all intents and purposes, it's 388% at skill level 10, and 418% if you max out her Mindscape levels on those skills. And while those numbers seem pretty daunting, if you factor in her passive abilities, her card set bonus, her Mindscape stat level ups, and potentially her 5-star weapon, you do get closer to a reasonable range of rolling for substats, assuming you have the correct main stats on her cards. Either way, this is the kind of thing that I think will give some people some hesitancy with Wind, as most of us hate building out card sets, and some people really can't be bothered to min-max, which I don't blame them, it's a pain. But I think it is important to mention it so that people are aware it could take some time to build Wind out how you want her, especially if you're trying to go for her stat breakpoints. And then speaking of card sets, I guess it would be worthwhile to talk about her card sets a little bit. If you watched my video I did a few weeks back on the new card sets that had come out with 3.0, I believe, I mentioned that there was a set that was released that was pretty much exclusively made for Tempest Wind. That set is Creation and Worry. The 4-piece Worry set will give you the same highlight bonus that Prosperity gives. It's that 25% highlight charge to start the battle. And the 2-piece bonus, which helps Wind a lot, is 80% SP recovery, so a pretty big chunk towards her breakpoint. The full set bonus with Creation also gives you a crit mult buff based on your SP recovery, so all things working towards helping Wind get to those breakpoints she's looking for. That said, if you don't have any creation cards, you may need to use a selector on one or borrow one from another unit if needed, since again, I don't know if she has a terrific backup option in general. And then next up, I think we can hit the weapon a little bit. I do think there are more people who are typically interested in weapon pulling than dupe pulling, so I think we can cover the 5-star here. As always, the 5-star is a significant upgrade over the 4-star in my opinion. In Wind's case, her weapon Wind Plum Dance will increase her crit mult by about 36%, again helping her move towards those stat goals. Then when using a skill on an ally, she'll increase all of their crit mult, and when the main target deals damage, increase its damage by about 3% for every 50 SP spent by that skill. Both of those buffs are for 2 turns, so pretty solid buffing. I think part of the reason I like the 5-star is just that I think, well, one, the 4-star is kind of lackluster in a lot of ways. It does help a little bit with crit mult building on Wind, but getting it to proc is kind of annoying, and it also doesn't really benefit Wind nearly as much as the 5-star on that front, and it doesn't benefit her teammates at all as it has no team buffing effects. You also can't really make use of Navigator version Wind's weapons at all, since the units are so vastly different, pun not intended by the way. The Navigator version of Wind scales on totally different stats, and it's just a totally different type of unit, so the weapon gives totally different types of things, which are kind of kit specific, none of which play super nice with Tempest Riko in my opinion. So just not a ton of great options outside of just trying to tough it out with a fully duped 4-star Tempest Wind weapon. And by saying that, I'm not trying to say that the 5-star is mandatory, but I do think you will probably want to try and give it a 50-50 if you have the gems stored up to do so. I think it will help her a good bit. And then the last thing I want to cover here is her awarenesses, so if you're like me and you don't really know all that much about the other versions or kit details on units that we don't have in-game yet, you may have heard that Winvast really wants her A1 to be good, so I was kind of just under the assumption that you needed it. After reading her kit myself and talking with some of the members of the community, I don't really think I feel that way. Not that it's bad by any means, it's very good, but it's not something that affects her entire kit overall. It's kind of just something that affects her kit in this specific instance. But let me explain it a little bit. Essentially, it all revolves around the skill 1 on Wind. So her skill 1 is going to just be a wind damage skill, but the main thing is that it inflicts an effect called Falling Petals for 2 turns. This Falling Petals effect will make it so that when the enemy inflicted with it takes damage, they take increased damage in the form of increased attack based on a percentage of Wind's crit mult, which seems pretty solid, right? Well, the only issue is that this skill is locked to trigger that effect from taking wind damage. So essentially, it only works with a handful of characters that can use wind skills, severely limiting the amount of teams she can use the skill with. The A1 opens that up and changes the effect to work with all elements of damage, which is why people are saying that she's kind of limited without it. Now, the thing is, though, the skill 1 only gets used in single target enemy content. Like Howler, Wind has 2 rotations depending on what type of content she's in. Her skill 1's only used in single target content, and her skill 2 is what you use in AoE content, both of which get rotated with the skill 3 in general in all types of content. So in theory, you've already kind of lessened the impact of that elemental restriction on the skill 1 by making it so that it isn't really used on all types of content in the game. It's really just the half of the content that's single target. And not to mention, her skill 2 is also a totally viable skill to use on single target content. It's just a buff to the team. Plus, you can add on to that you can still use the skill 1 as normal in Wind content with Flurray or Mont Swan anyways, so I just don't see it as this massive missing piece to the Tempest Riko puzzle without the A1 that I kind of thought would exist before I got into reading her kit a little bit more. Again, will it help to open up a variety of single target teams? Absolutely. It's a great effect and a strong skill, but she is by no means like an A1 or bust type character in my eyes, and I don't really typically cover much higher than A1 because at that point I feel like you're either pulling for pleasure because you like the unit, or you're super into the meta and you're probably already decided on what awareness you think is best. Generally though, I do think the A1 is a solid stopping point if you're a person who likes to take advantage of awarenesses. I don't think the A2 is game breaking. It raises her buffing ceiling, but again, I don't think it's worth breaking the bank for. And the A3 is just a skill level breakthrough, so A1 seems kind of like a natural stopping point to me. Anything beyond A2 or A3 is kind of just high spender territory anyway, and at that point, you might as well just go all in for the A6, right? Like if you're going A4, what's an A6 at that point? And the A6 on Wind is kind of insane, so I personally plan to go for her A0, R0, as I do everyone, and then maybe run a 50-50 as I do with solid A1s usually. And if I win, I get the A1. If I lose, I have my next unit guaranteed in 80 pulls, which to me is a fine trade-off. So my official recommendation is going to be that everyone should consider A0 a recommended pull. And I think if you're a low, mid spender, or a free-to-play with a nice little backlog of gems, I do think her weapon is worthy of a pull. But in the case that you don't mind spending a little bit if something seems worthwhile, then I do think the A1 is potentially an option for you. Again, for free-to-play players though, I typically recommend you try and go for a wider roster than a taller one. I think Astrolabe has proven out that it can be useful to have a big roster of base level units, and just having the options for me personally outweighs maybe having fewer characters but higher awareness characters. But as always, make sure to do what makes you happy. My obligatory "it's just a game" disclaimer: do whatever gives you your fun. But with that said, I think it's probably going to do it for this one. I don't know when the character guide will be out, but expect it at some point before the part 2 live stream if you're interested in watching that. Otherwise, we'll be covering everything from 3.2 as we always do. My friends, thank you as always for your support. I will see you on the next one, and have a good one.